Hi there. Today I want to look at two photo books produced in the 1990s that significantly impacted British photography. Nick Waplington's Living Room and Richard Billingham's Raise a Laugh. They emerged at a time when Britain was reeling from the upheaval of Thatcher's 1980s. The working class had paid the heaviest price for the sweeping social and political transformations of that period. The images produced by these two photographers were raw and intimate, and it was difficult for anyone to turn away from the grinding reality that they presented. Photography during that period was being embraced by the art world, and patrons of upmarket London galleries were suddenly being confronted by images of people living very different lives from theirs. Chaotic intimacy was replacing the highly constructed and conceptually polished photography of the 80s. Probably before I get into their work, it's useful to get an understanding of which photographers had made an impact during the decade before. Those who laid the groundwork for the work of these two photographers to be accepted and understood. I'll look at a few examples within the UK and internationally. I've chosen 4 photographers from the 1980s who were producing work in response to the social fallout of Thatcher's neoliberal policies. Chris Killip photographed the violence of deindustrialization in a formal documentary manner. His black and white photographs capture the soul of marginalized England. Martin Parr focused a critical eye on people from all classes. His images were hyper-realistic, ironic, and unforgiving. Tom Woods lived in Liverpool and photographed the small moments that he observed around him. He didn't sugarcoat the daily grind, but his subjects were part of his Merseyside community. Paul Graham's approach was far more intellectual and conceptual. His work interrogated how social issues were reflected in everyday experience, institutions, and within the landscape. The photographs were quiet and subtle, but they exposed the failure of the country systems to attend to the needs of those at the lower end of the social order. Internationally, Nan Goldin's The Ballad of Sexual Dependency could only be described as a cultural event. Her book was published in 1986, and it redefined how photographers approach social and personal subject matter. Goldin established the diaristic autobiographical model for photo essays, allowing personal experience to become the central theme. Nick Waplington was creating the photographs for his book Living Room at the same time that Goldin was producing hers.
I wanted to make work where I was engaging with the same people and the people were engaging with the work. This is before The Ballad of Sexual Dependency. I hadn't even seen that. I became aware of that when I first became involved with Aperture. So Nan Goldin was the other person, I think, who was making work in that way, but her work is kind of more formally composed than mine. In fact, she said to me, my pictures are like the ones she rejects.
Waplington was barely out of high school in 1984 when he first began hanging around Broxtowe, a working-class housing estate in Nottingham. Initially, he got to know the area while visiting his grandfather, who lived there for 50 years. But then he began developing relationships with neighbors and family friends.
It started when I was taking pictures of my granddad in his living room, and one of the women came in with 2 small children, and she had agreed to collect his pension from the post office. And I took a picture of her in our living room, And I just said, can I take some pictures of you? I just said that. And she said, come over on Sunday afternoon.
Over a period of several years, he would make regular visits to the area, generally choosing to photograph on the weekends when people were relaxing, watching football or socializing. Living Room was published in 1991, and it was an instant sensation within the photography world, as well as with the general public. He said that this image was made outside his grandfather's house during half-time in an England World Cup match. His grandfather was a partsman at a British Leyland garage, so people would drop off their cars for him to fix. He described this as a typical living room scene from the late 1980s. He said everything centered on the living room. It's where everyone met and congregated. The woman on the left had had 14 children, including 2 sets of twins, and on the right are 3 of her daughters. Waplington would spend hours sitting on the floor playing with the kids, just waiting for something to happen. When he thought there was a possibility of a picture, he would pick up the camera, snap a few frames, and then put the camera down. He would then just stop taking pictures for a period of time. This was the way in which he avoided allowing his presence to dominate the interactions. There's always a fine line between being aware enough to capture telling moments and overdoing it. As soon as the camera becomes the focus, one loses the component of spontaneity. When he was a young boy, Billingham was in constant fear of his stepfather. The rule was don't speak unless spoken to. This experience led him to become very attuned to changes in mood, and also taught him to dissolve into the background.
This is a kind of interesting thing, is the ability to photograph in a documentary way and make it seem like you're not there. And that's something you can't teach people. You can do it or you can't do it. And it's about kind of body language and how I'm not very talkative, I'm talking now, but I'm kind of quite happy to just let things develop and I'm just kind of there. So I can kind of blend into the background and people just kind of forget that I'm there.
Knowing that there's a level of voyeurism in all documentary photography, he would purposely involve himself in general community activities, often playing football with the kids for hours. He was keen to develop long-term relationships with the people he was photographing. And because he wasn't in a hurry to complete the project, he didn't push the process. The result was he was able to capture people in a very relaxed manner. The photographs are sometimes shocking in their reality, but he believes that shooting in color helped to present his subjects' lives a little bit more positively. He really didn't want dark, grainy, black and white pictures of people looking miserable in damp houses. He described this picture as a typical weekday morning, everyone having a smoke before taking the kids to school and heading off to work. The publication of Living Room in 1991 was timely in a number of ways. From a sociological perspective, it could be considered to be a judgment on Thatcherism and its effect on the working class. Stylistically, it coincided with a shift in the UK to colour documentary photography. Subject-wise, it characterized photography's move away from the idea of a grand statement about the unfamiliar toward more personal and intimate projects. For some critics, their knee-jerk reaction was to describe the work as voyeuristic and exploitative. The Guardian wrote that it seemed that Waplington had gone visiting the natives to bring back news of their exotic doings. But the pictures also prompted the opposite response. Many believed that his work had transcended voyeurism to achieve emotional impact and intimacy. Richard Avedon said, "Each picture as dangerous and ecstatic as a Bruegel." When Richard Billingham initially picked up a camera and focused it on his alcoholic father Ray and his violent mother Liz, the pictures were intended as studies for his paintings, but they took on a life of their own. In 1997, Charles Thacher included Billingham's work in his Sensation show at the Royal Academy, placing it alongside Damien Hirst's Shark. The pictures also generated for him a Turner Prize nomination and global gallery fame. The images have a raw, unpolished aesthetic, but they're also extremely considered. They are seen through the eyes of someone who studied and appreciated the history of English art. When Billingham was trying to create paintings of his father, he found that Ray was unable to sit still for any length of time. He would reach for a cigarette, go to the toilet, or get another glass of his home-brewed alcohol. Billingham became frustrated and got himself a cheap 35mm camera. This allowed him to freeze any scene that appealed to him, and he was then able to spend more time working on the paintings.
I was living in the tower block, and my mother had left my father because my father had become an alcoholic since being made redundant at work. He was unhappy with his life, and he was drinking too much. And while I was doing this foundation course in art, there was just me and my father living in this two-bedroom apartment. I thought on my foundation course I'd like to make some paintings about the tragedy of this situation. He was very sad, and he decided to stay in his bedroom all day and night and just drink incessantly.
His parents lived in a cramped, dimly lit apartment in a council block outside Birmingham. Ray was unemployed, alcohol-dependent, and unwilling to leave the flat, while Liz was obese and heavily tattooed. Billingham described her as short-tempered, volatile, and quick to raise a fist. His pictures exposed the multiple fractures within their dysfunctional domestic life. He was able to find humor and sadness, but also produced a form of poetic beauty by blending the domestic dramas with the colorful wallpaper, carpets, and caftans. The editor of the Sunday Telegraph magazine was shown a few of these pictures by a friend, and he became interested in the work. Billingham handed him a carrier bag of prints that he had processed at the local chemist. When the idea of making a book came up, Billingham wasn't sure. He didn't want to pigeonhole himself as a photographer because he was still keen to become a painter. He had never given much thought to photography books, but when he saw Larry Clark's publication Tulsa, he recognized their potential. He began photographing with more intentionality. He wanted his pictures to be emotionally moving, rather than a document about misery. He said that his parents were largely unconcerned about his picture taking. They were generally more preoccupied by things like what they should have for supper or whether the cat had fleas.
I took my mother and father to see a couple of shows as well, but they were kind of more interested in picking little details out and stuff like that. To be honest, they were pretty much indifferent to it all, and very hard to kind of engage with. It's hard to engage them with the work, really.
Even though Billingham's photographs were not produced with any political motive in mind, the publication of his book in 1996 coincided with a post-Thatcher enthusiasm for change. Tony Blair's New Labour had won a landslide victory, and the culture surrounding art photography moved towards work that displayed a more direct honesty. As with Waplington's pictures, this work also received conflicting feedback. Some critics condemned the work for being exploitative and even a freak show. Others heaped praise for its contribution to what was later termed confessional or diaristic photography. A flattering quote by Robert Frank was included on the back cover of the book, even though at the time Billingham didn't know who Frank was. I'll end with a few video clips that he shot during the time that he was photographing his parents. But I hope you enjoyed the work from both these photographers, and I'll see you next time.
I guess it was important for me to try to recreate my own memories.
Oh, that back, eh? You get crust, he says. You get crust. Put drink, he says. You get the crust, he says.
Well, I don't need money anyway.
Because you don't eat anything. You never go outside this block or even this flat. It's tearing me apart as well.
You're gonna kiss me goodbye then.